Hello, and welcome everybody to episode 79 of Comic DNA, on which we will be discussing The Tick by Ben Edlund. Did I mess up his name?
It don't matter.
But
and like Lund, Edlund, but everyone just says Edlund.
Edlund, yeah. But as you might see in the video, with me today is my good friend Gabriel Dunston.
Hi.
Back, as always, for a lengthy discussion, I'm sure.
It's already been an hour and a half. You missed the first 90 minutes.
We did a little pregame, not talking about the Tick, so you didn't miss anything important.
No. We talked about all the stuff that's uncomfortable for everyone else in the world. It's just to get it out of our system. Aaron and I haven't seen each other physically in, what was that, 2016?
It's been a while. How long has it been since we've been talking about doing a podcast on this book? Because
we've been talking about this episode for at least a year and a half.
Yeah, I want to say closer to 2 years.
Very cynically, I've got my own book to push, so I poor Aaron. I called him up, be like, "Hey, Aaron, you wanna do that talk now?"
So yes, that's okay. I mean, that's the whole reason we do this podcast, for cynical reasons like that. What is this book that you're talking about there, Gabe?
I've been working on a graphic novel series called Purgatory Pub. I wrote the whole thing in 2013, and I've been spending from that time to this drawing out the comic. Now, I revise as I go. Mm-hmm. The script gets sharper and whatnot, but I kickstarted. It's a 4-book series. I kickstarted book 1, seen here. I kickstarted... book 2, seen here. And as of this exact second, I am kickstarting book 3. It is easily the best book in the series that I've made so far. Because I revise as I go, the writing and the dialogue in this one is sharper than the other ones. And because I've made, this represents about 250 pages of comic. So I've made these pages of comic plus my client work plus some kids' books that I've made. So I'm the best artist I've ever been. I'm really happy with the art in book 3. And that's the first time that's happened where I finished the work and I look back and I'm like, oh, okay, that hand looks all right. Little tiny little artist stuff like that. As of the time of this recording, which is Friday, October the 3rd?
It is the 4th.
The 4th. As of Friday, October the 4th, it is still kickstarting. It's early days yet. I've got 19 days left to go. It ends October the 23rd. This is another departure. I was able to fund the first 50% in the first 24 hours.
Yeah, that's good. Congratulations on that.
A lot of returning readers, a lot of people, strangers who just discovered book 1. Have come back every year, every 2 years to help fund the book. And that's very exciting for me, and it lets me know I must be doing something right. And speaking for myself, it's a comedy. It's my local retailer came up with the best summary. He says it's a satire that uses charm instead of snark. It's a comedy that's not trying to take the piss out of anyone. It's about friends. It's about brotherly love. And it's about heartbreak. It's a heartfelt story, straight out of the heart. It's the most personal story that I could tell for the person that I was in 2013 and these past couple of years. And if anybody watching or listening to this would consider backing it, I would sure appreciate it. And you can find it at purgatory-pub.com. purgatory-pub.com.
Excellent. We'll put the link.
And
if
you're a brand new reader, there's a deep discount to get all 3 books at once. And if you don't want another print book in your house, it's DRM free PDFs.
Mm-hmm. Good deal. Well, I look forward to reading it, Gabe. I did back. I've got your first 2 books, and actually,
he sure does.
You can't see it in the video, but I actually am wearing my Purgatory
T-shirt. Snap! Holy crap! You're wearing the shirt. Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy. Yeah. Oh, I was not prepared for that.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So the camera is a little too focused on my giant head, but this.
See, I wasn't going to comment on the size of your head this time. I was going to be kind. The size of your head or the size of your hair.
Yeah.
Oh, fun fact. My hair is similarly sized and styled. That's why I'm wearing the hat today.
Smart.
Yeah, but I still want to look like a goober, so that's why I put on the giant can earphones.
Well, they're getting the
and
job
yeah,
done.
your support has been huge. I can't thank you enough. I haven't sent you a thank you note on the Kickstarter yet, but I'm working on it.
Don't worry about
I
it.
gotta catch up.
I know how busy it is running a campaign.
Yeah, and how much nervous diarrhea is involved. You didn't need to know
Yeah,
that,
that
but
was
but you knew it anyway.
awesome.
And if you're listening at home, that's what it's like to run a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Just so much acid reflux and diarrhea. So much. Am I charming now? Am I charming people?
I think you should drink more coffee. That'll probably solve your problem.
This is my second cup.
Oh no. So
today we are going to discuss like one of the greatest inspirations for comic making that I've ever had. How about you?
It honestly, to an embarrassing degree, actually. So
I'm not embarrassed at all. Like, this is what comics are supposed to be.
I totally agree. Don't get me started.
It's not everything. I'm glad that there's serious stuff out there. I love Asterios Polyp. I love all the noir comics. And I'm not one of those guys who thinks that comics should be superheroes. I'm actually one of those guys who's pretty much done with superheroes. But I will never be done with this book.
Yeah. So, one thing I have to say is that I have probably been more influenced as a comic creator by the Tick than possibly any other specific comic or character. Like, and I say that really on a subconscious level. I think that's how influenced I am.
Yes.
Because like I love Spider-Man and I love the X-Men, and when I make superhero books, I'm very consciously like, thinking about those comics, and like I love, it's just like I think about those characters and the kind of stories that they tell and the kind of stories that I want to tell.
And they were fun and they're valuable.
And they're great. But then when I go back and reread The Tick,
sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. And then when I go back and reread The Tick, I go, oh my God, everything I was doing was just totally ripping off Ben Edlund, and I I wasn't even realizing it. Like,
oh yeah,
and
it's not just you. Like that's a lot of people who are making any kind of comics or comedy animation. It's a constant looking back. Is this too ticky?
Yeah, exactly.
Like the creators of Venture Brothers are constantly saying, crap, is this too ticky?
Yeah. They at least have a little bit more of an in because they've worked on the Tick before, and they've worked with Ben Edlund, and Ben Edlund himself has worked on the Venture Brothers.
Absolutely.
So there's a little bit of a natural crossover there, as opposed to me, who's just some jerk, halfway across the country, just ripping off their material. But yeah, I know I love the Tick. I am going to assume that you, like me, was first exposed to the character through the cartoon, not through the comics. Is that correct?
Actually, they happened at the same time for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Unlike yourself, I'm the youngest of 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time that the cartoon was hitting Fox Kids in the Saturday mornings, my brother had the original omnibus of Tick #1, the first trade paperback, which had Tick issues at the time were like 32 pages. They were big issues.
Yeah, they're big. Yeah.
Essentially, each issue was a self-contained episode of an animated series, which turned out to not be an accident.
Yeah.
So I remember watching the Tick, and my second oldest brother was into it at the same time that I was, and we're 9 years apart.
Okay.
He was like a freshman or a sophomore at UNC, and I was like 9 years old.
Okay.
And so, yeah. Now, I would hang out in my brother's room, and he would have a good-sized pile of comics, most of them trades, and he had Sin City and the Tick. And I picked up the Tick and thought that I was getting into some adult stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my cool older brother's into this. This must be like adult and interesting and cool. And I just like so many. Aaron, you and I are both into music. So many musicians that we know or met listen to like Pink Floyd's The Wall. And it was like the first adult thing where it's like, oh, music is serious, and it opened up their mind, right? For me personally, that was the Rush retrospective albums.
Okay, yeah.
The Tick was that for me. I read The Tick, and just the world opened up. It was like, this is what comics can be. This is what comics are, and just it planted a seed for a certain kind of humor that I will never get over, like a certain kind of humor that I hold dearly. And part of the humor is taking the faceless henchmen and giving them jokes, giving them a little bit of character, making them mundane. It's their guys named Charlie and Earl who are, this is just kind of their job. And that has been my favorite parody subgenre in comics ever since. One of my favorite comics that I learned the most from when I first started making comics was a series called Maintenance, and it's about a bunch of supervillains who work in the same underground layer. It's shared supervillain underground layers, and it's about the two janitors who work there. That's the whole series. Like directly behind the camera on either side, I've got the original pages from that series, drawn by Robbie Rodriguez of Spider-Gwen fame.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I've got art from Robbie Rodriguez from before he was famous.
Little hipster cred there.
Absolutely, it's more than a little, sir. More than a little. I'm not the king of the nerds. I'm just one of the kings.
Yeah, I think you kind of you touched on something that I think is what makes the Tick stand out so much is the way the way Edlund plays with tropes of the superhero genre, and he comes at it from a very absurdist comedic angle. Like, it's very Douglas Adams in terms of the comedy. But I also think it's just interesting the time that this was made in the 80s. You know, this was part of that 80s indie comics boom, kind of.
Well, and now it's not even the 80s. We're talking 1989.
Right,
80,
yeah.
Like this is a stupid sentence to say, but the 90s began in 1989.
Right.
Because that launched all the stuff that became cool. Like, that's when the Burton Batman movie came out. That's when the original Crow comic came out. That's when a lot of music that was really important during the era, like your Type O Negative, that was their seminal album. It was a lot of seminal albums.
Nirvana's first album, Bleach, was
that's right. That was Nirvana's.
89. Yeah,
I'm almost sure it was 89. Like, I cannot tell you how much stuff was happening in 89, and this book was one of it.
Yeah.
And because this book had so many pages per issue, and because it was A, comics are laborious, B, thick comics, like 32 pages and more, made by this indie team that is not getting money up front, are even more so laborious. Aaron and I might know something about that. Like, these issues came out slowly. So, just during the time where a black and white indie could get some traction in the 80s. The Tick started getting their traction. Similarly with Ninja Turtles, like they were both in the same vein. Ninja Turtles was supposed to be an absurdist, weirdo oddity.
Well, it was just playing on tropes and parodying, specifically parodying Frank Miller. Which, by the way, can I just ask you, is Frank Miller the comic creator that just keeps on giving? Because he makes Daredevil comics and Batman comics and, you know, Sin City and Ronin, and then we don't just get those comics. Then we get Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which are directly parodying him, and we get The Tick, which is directly parodying him. And we get all these other people that were inspired by Frank to do comedy, like comedic versions of his comics.
Oh yeah, well, Frank doesn't get. I don't know anything about the guy personally because I'm just so scared to find out.
Right.
much like Ditko or Orson Scott Card, that he's got a streak of crazy running down the middle of him that I'm worried about.
Yeah.
But like, I think dude's funny. because I remember the first time I read Sin City. Like I read Sin City shortly after I read The Tick. Like I picked up Sin City first because, let's be real, because boobs.
Yes.
And I read a couple pages, and at 9 years old, I was a very good little boy. I was like, you know what? That's too much boobs for me. I'm gonna put that down. And I picked it up again when I was 16. And when I was 16, I read it and I was like, oh, it's so gritty and real and crazy. Yeah. And then I read it again when I was in my 20s. I'm like, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
This is clearly over the top.
So over the top.
Nonsense. Yeah. And it's like it's like the Sam Raimi over the top. It's like, yeah, I know it's ridiculous. That's the point. It doesn't make it less awesome. It's like heavy metal, the genre. There is no such thing as a parody of heavy metal. There is only more heavy metal.
Yeah.
That's why every serious metal band in history loves Spinal Tap and has the album.
Yeah.
Because, it's funny, but it's awesome.
It's also
and that's why,
true.
Yeah, and that's why everybody loves Gwar. Because, man, it's like, all the stuff that makes metal awesome. Just like turn that up to 11. So like so Frank Miller gave us indirectly a lot of stuff, and one of the stuffs is this here book, The Tick. So Aaron, tell me about your first time reading The Tick.
Well, my first time reading The Tick would have been like actually several years after I had seen the cartoon and fallen in love with it. It was probably shortly, because like a timeline. I've been reading comics like all my life, but like I think like the first comic I got was a G.I. Joe comic when I was like in the first or second grade, like really young, and I've been reading comics forever. But I'm also old enough, like it's weird to say, but I'm old enough to know that as a kid reading comics, I never had to go to a comic book shop to buy comics. I would buy them in the grocery store. And
they still had spinner racks in the
exactly.
grocery store.
I would buy comics off of spinner racks. And so I never read The Tick until I was late high school, like late teenager, probably 17 or 18, when I started going to comic book stores for the first time. Because that also coincided with the transition. Like I was like a preteen reading comics off comic racks. Then they stopped doing that. And then I kind of stopped reading comics for a while and was just reading like manga that I bought at Borders. And then I started going to comic book shops and getting reacquainted with comics. And so I did start buying whatever current Tick books were being published at the time, it was kind of on and off. Like they weren't, like the Tick wasn't like a steady book. Because by that point, the cartoon had come and gone, and I don't think the sitcom had happened yet. I think there was a lot of talk about it, and then it probably was starting to happen. There was probably some press for it, so I think there was maybe some books coming out around that time to kind of gin up attention, for that.
Well, New England Press, the publisher that put this out, it's kind of a fun story. New England Comics is a chain.
Yeah,
like it started. There's a comic book store. Now this is fun and interesting. I've been going to comic shops literally since before I was born, which is a weird thing to say.
That's a weird sentence.
Youngest of 5, my mom would bring my brothers there while she was pregnant with me.
Yeah.
Damn. Wow. So I've been going to the same comic shop.
So you've even got
retailer.
You've even got me
life.
beat. You've even got me beat. I've been reading comics in the second grade. Well, you've been reading comics since you were -6 months old.
Oh, gee. My first comics I got before I could read. I'd have to con one of my brothers to read it to me.
Okay.
So New England Comics was a comic shop in, I want to say they started in Boston. And they would open up another store until they had like 4 stores. So they had their own little chain going, and they had some extra cash. And the guy in charge was like, I want to make comics. So they tried to start up a little publisher, and Ben Edlund was working at one of these shops, or so the legend goes. And he was this super artsy kid. Like he was in his high school superlative for both his 8th and 12th grade year as the most artistic kid there. So it took him a year. It took him a year or more to make the Tick #1. because he was also in school. Like he started
Right.
his senior year of high school and he was in college for film, would you believe?
I do believe, because he's been working
Yeah,
in
but Homeboy's whole goal was to work in TV and film and animation, and comics was his stepping stone, like so many people.
Yeah.
And in a short period of time, he gave us a masterpiece. We're going to get more into the man himself later because I find him such an interesting enigma of a character.
I do too, actually.
Yeah. So New England Comics made their own publisher. The Tick took off. And so they owned it themselves, and they didn't have a whole lot of books that are doing that well. So they were constantly packaging and repackaging the Tick. And because it's black and white, you make it on cheap paper. They did some color versions. So what indie creators, especially the likes of Jeff Smith, realized was you make the thing and then you sell the thing 4 different times. you sell the issue, you sell the trade, you sell the omnibus, you sell the original page. Those are the 4. Those are the 4 that Jeff Smith did. And New England Comics found a way to do it 6, 8 times. And they're still doing it. And God bless them, because I'm still buying them.
Oh, yeah.
Because every time I lend somebody my Tick, it never comes back. And I can't blame people. And God bless them, because they're black and white, and because New England does the thing where they print them on the cheap. Like it's not bad, but like everybody else is making these cloth covered hardcover books with the little down the middle and the gold foil stamping, and New England is just like, here you go, it's cheap.
Yeah, here's your brick.
And, to which my broke ass is like, give me the brick.
Yeah.
So they've been reprinting, and also because there was like a periods of 8 months would go in between issues. So they would reprint to keep themselves on the shelf. In between those. So you discovered the Tick like late high school, you say?
Well, no. I discovered the Tick while the cartoon was airing, but I started reading the comic, like late high school, and then like you said, because they're always reprinting, collected editions, I eventually got, one of the collect, like the complete Edlund, I think it is. It's got all 12 issues.
Which, fun fact, Aaron here bought me this copy and mailed it to me. This is the complete Edlund. This is a copy that Aaron Walther, bless him, sent this to me. So just want to have a moment to let y'all know exactly how stand-up of a guy he really is. Because all of my copies walked off, and that was it. I don't lend this one out. This one's just mine.
Well, I've been wanting to do this. Like you said, we've been wanting to do this episode for a while, and when you told me you didn't have the book anymore, I was like, well, we can't do an episode if you don't have the book. Like,
no, see, I thought it was more like you can't say that you make comics unless this is on your shelf.
Yeah, that too,
I must write this injustice right away.
I had to correct a grave wrong.
And correct it, you did, and bless you. And this is the first. This is the first of at least 2 Tick episodes we're going to do, because the next one I'm going to return the flavor. Sorry, and send you the complete Big Blue Destiny, which was Tick's purest revival.
I actually think I have that book.
That's the best one.
See, I haven't read it yet. I haven't read it yet.
It's we'll talk about it later.
Well, we'll save that for another episode. So,
all right. So you need to direct the conversation now, because there's so many directions to go in.
Let's talk a little bit about the book itself. Like, we've been talking about Ben Edlund, and we kind of touched on the time period of it being the late 80s. And
it's the late 80s, early 90s. The black and white indie is a viable thing, and let me open it up. And the artwork. No, that's the original. Here we go. The artwork looks like so. And I'm sure Mr. Aaron is going to throw up some actual images on here if he decides to edit better. We'll see. It's black and white. And this was also during the time in comics where, oddly, comics were less popular than they are now. But there was more money in comics. Yeah. So, like, pencilers and inkers and, like, having that whole pipeline of production was a real thing. That is just not now. So all of these books were penciled and written by Ben Edlund, but they were inked by somebody else. They were lettered by somebody else. And I tell you what, man, the penciling is on point. The inking is perfect. The lettering is, that guy could have done a little bit better, but he did fine.
Yeah, it's good enough for an indie book.
And the thing that's driving me nuts as I was rereading it for like the 6th time in my life is like from the word go, from the very first actual issue that they put out, the art is on point. Like in just as somebody who's been making comics for more than 10 years, the art, the composition is dead on. The character design is very sharp. The drawings in between are very consistent. Like the original Ninja Turtles wasn't bad, but it was very clear those guys hadn't been making comics for a long time.
Right.
Meanwhile, Ben Edlund, as a teenager and a guy in his early 20s, came screaming out the gate on top of it. Like all of the little things that you'd only notice if you've been doing this for years. The pacing, the composition, the way that he would time his jokes, dead on from the very beginning.
Yeah. I do think that. So like, one of the things I would say that I think stands out among Edlund's art, like you were saying, like from the gate, right out of the gate, from the get go. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like really like clean, like it looks like a comic page. Like he's like you said, the pacing is really good, and I do think a lot of that comes from he's very clearly drawing off of the other like masters of the time. Like he's clearly inspired by Frank Miller. Like he's clearly not just parodying Frank Miller, but like his artistic style has some Millerisms, like the inks, but also like a lot of older like probably more classic comic art, like of the
like your John Buscema, your John Romita.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He's definitely got a lot of that going on there, and I think
not so much Kirby.
No. I don't see a lot of Kirby, but I see the Buscema and like John Byrne and like those types of artists. I think that is also like reading through this. That's another thing that kind of almost really places it in its time period, because I was just reminded how much I love that type of comic book art, and how much it doesn't exist anymore. Like,
for me personally, I think that's actually what makes it kind of timeless.
Well, I would agree with you. Yeah, I would say that it actually spins around to be like, this is like what
it's classic
art. Yeah, it's classic comic art. So
the way that he drew it will never go out of style, because it was also his own interpretation. Like it translated to an animated series so quickly and easily because his character designs already fit in that vein. Like the Tick did not change at all. His character design. Arthur changed slightly for the better because I think his Arthur was more oddly shaped.
Yeah, he was more just like bigger, and he had like the big fat jaw.
Yeah, like he had the triangle shape with a big jaw, which is hard to animate. But on top of that, like he also just drew him bigger. Like something that drove me insane about this comic and the TV series, Arthur's supposed to be a chubby schlub. Yeah, and he's chubby. Like from the chest up, like he looks like he's pretty built. And in the Edlund comic, he looks like he is built.
It's like the difference between like in the cartoon, he's played by like Paul Giamatti, and in the comic he's John Goodman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, like, well played. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the voices for the cartoon were just perfect. Like that is the voice of the Tick. That's my big complaint about the second live action series. It's like that's not the character, but we'll go into that in a minute. Like after his first issue, you can watch him slack off of the Frank Miller style very quickly. Like his things got a lot cleaner, and the inker, whichever guy was inking for most of them. Pause while I look it up because there is a masthead that tells you. Let's see. Story and art. Inks by Max Banks. When Max Banks started inking, things definitely cleaned up a lot more. The line weights were good. Because it's black and white, Max knew where to put his spot blacks. And he also put it in a place that was also rather timeless. Like Kirby's art is not timeless, it's Kirby's art, and it exists in that time, place, and it's inked in a very specific way. Whereas this guy definitely took it like this is inking and lettering are supposed to be the invisible art, and because I've made comics forever, it's very visible to me, and he did an excellent job. But as just a kid reading a comic, he did an excellent job of getting the hell out of the way. And the style is so simple, it's very deceptively simple, because the jokes are dense. There's so many tiny jokes in the panels, and so the inking is very clean to make room for the letters, to make room for those little jokes. The Tick, one of the first jokes is the Tick leaps off of a building and tries to bounce off of one of those flagpoles. But the Tick, fun fact, weighs like a ton. Right. He weighs like half a ton. So the flagpole breaks off under his arm. He just lands on the ground, and the flagpole bounces up and down. And he has a conversation with the guy. And for the whole conversation, the flagpole keeps bouncing. Boing, 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 it's like 2 pages that this thing keeps bouncing.
Yeah, and they keep having the sound effect in every panel. Boing, boing, boing,
and it's so perfect. Something else that makes this timeless is Edlund's writing, the entire concept. We have the Tick's origin. It begins with him in a straitjacket in a padded cell, and he just says, "This is boring. I'm bored. I'm leaving." And he leaves, and that's it. And that's all we get. So on the one hand, we have an origin. So when people will be like, "Tell me about the Tick. Where's he from?" He could be like, "He jumped out of a mental asylum."
Yeah.
And they deal with that briefly. Like the Tick has moments of actual anguish and crisis. They're very short-lived. Where when he pops out of it, he says, "Oh, thank you, Arthur. For a moment, I had a lucid thought."
Yeah.
And it's just clear that the Tick is choosing this half-baked fantasy where he's a superhero looking for supervillains, because the alternative is living the life that Arthur lived. And Arthur is his foil, and that Arthur, everyone thinks he should go to a mental hospital. He's like, "No, I would just rather put on a suit and be somebody's sidekick than work at an accountant's job for another 15 years.
Yeah, I think Arthur is... Because Arthur isn't really introduced until issue 4, I think.
3 or 4. They take their time, and they plant seeds.
Yeah,
if you read it the second or third time, you'll see his silhouette following the Tick from early on.
But I think Arthur is the character that he really he brings the character, as it were.
He's the Watson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's the Watson. That's an excellent way to put it.
Yeah, he's in it, but he's also one of us.
Yeah, because the Tick is basically an absurdist parody of superheroes. So he has no character. His character is that he is
I'm a superhero.
He's a exactly. His character is that he's a joke.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, my absolute favorite joke from the cartoon, which is, I have to say it, which is when the episode where Arthur gets the belt and makes himself huge, and they're fighting, and Arthur's getting angry, and he's like, "I'm always your sidekick. I'm always your comic relief." And Tick goes, "Arthur, please, I'm my own comic relief."
And it's true.
It's so true.
Like the Tick just thinks, what would a superhero do in this position? I'm gonna do that thing.
Yeah, and
it's very. He's also not just a superhero. He's the smiling superhero.
Yeah, again,
the way that Superman was originally supposed to be, the way that He-Man always was. He's the smiling hero. He's saving the day, and he's happy about it. Yeah. And so the moments of angst or anguish are extremely short-lived, because that's not fun, and
that's not the point.
Yeah, but they are also included because, he's actually a hero. He cares. He gives a damn.
Yeah. So.
And that one image where all the buildings come alive.
Yeah.
Oh man. So this is the part where I have to flip, and hopefully you'll just superimpose the proper page. I don't know how much editing you're gonna do.
I'm probably gonna end up doing a little bit between references to the cartoon and the comic.
The cartoon was so good.
It really was. It remains one of my favorite animated anythings that's ever been made.
They did so well. Okay, here's the page. So this page right here. That's the page where his first bout of angst comes up, and the buildings come alive and they're anthropomorphosed, and you see their face and they're yelling at him. And this page also makes me angry because the detail is so sharp and the composition is so dead on. And all of the lines, all of the texture, getting those buildings to make faces and emote and create this incredible mood. Like this page is a couple of days of work to make this page. This is several days. And this is several days of a guy who's in his early 20s. I could make this page now. I'm in my early 30s, and I've been making comics for 10 years.
Yeah.
This guy did it off the bat. This guy was more than 10 years my junior when he made it. And just freaking, and the thing that kills me is that's some legitimate talent with a capital T. And this right here, this is his entire body of work. To my knowledge, he never drew a thing after this.
Yeah, that actually is something I wanted to talk about, which is the unique situation of the character of the Tick, of how he began as a comic and Edlund as a creator. He created these comics, and then he moved on to try and pitch it into TV and etc. So he got the cartoon, and then the cartoon ended, and then he kept pitching it. He got the TV show, and then the sitcom ended, the one with Patrick Warburton. And then he kept pitching it, and he got the second show for Amazon. And I'm actually not sure the status. I think it is. No,
it's dead.
It's dead. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of fascinated by that aspect of the creator, because I see this a lot. There's like different types of creators, especially among comics. Like there's
the frustrated filmmaker.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's somebody like I'm thinking of what was I thinking of? One of my other favorite early 90s black and white comics, Scud the Disposable Assassin. By Rob Schrab, who is another, it's a great comic, and that's another one. And then Schrab did more comics than Edlund did, but it was another thing of he made the comic, but he really wanted to work in TV, and I think, as I understand it, I think he was pitching it around a lot in Hollywood, and it just never went anywhere. But he eventually finished the book, and he had a nice, like, I think it was like maybe 24 issues, and it was actually never finished until like 2 decades later. Like a few years ago, he put out the final 4 issues through Image, like maybe 8-10 years ago. But the point is, like, I think there's like creators like that, and then then there's your creators like Eric Larson, who's working on Spider-Man. He goes and joins the Image crew, and he creates his character Savage Dragon, and that's just his character, and he's just been making Savage Dragon comics forever. Like that's just what he's been doing. Every month he puts out a new Savage Dragon book, for the most part. Like
Savage Dragon and Spawn are the only things that remain.
Correct. Yeah.
And at least one of those should have died by now. Just throwing it out there.
Right. And like Spawn is another example of like, Todd McFarlane. He hit upon his, where I'm going with this is he hit upon his thing. Like this is his character. It's successful. So now he's just Spawn. Like he's doing Spawn. Everything is Spawn. And I always find that interesting. I guess this is the difference between like an artist's approach to comic book creating and someone like me who's a writer. And I probably have more of trying to think of a way to say this without sounding pretentious, an authorial bent where like I want to write a bunch of different stories. Like I don't want to just sit down and write my one character for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Like that's something that always fascinated me about Dave Sim. All he wants to do is Cerebus. That's it. His whole life is just making Cerebus, and whatever he's into, he'll make Cerebus do that thing.
Right.
And from where I'm sitting, I'm like, that sounds crazy. That sounds positively nuts, and it also sounds maddening. I've been making the same series for 6 years. I take a break in between every chapter of this book, and I take a longer break in between books to make other stuff so that I don't lose my bloody mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Edlund, I don't think Edlund's that guy. I think the Tick is just the character that won't die, because Edlund's been making his bones doing behind the scenes stuff. Hollywood and TV.
He's had a good career in TV, as I understand it.
Now, I'd like to put a little pin real quick. Do we want to? We barely talked about the book, because so I could go about the book, or I could talk about the man himself. We want to go first.
Let's go to Edlund in a second, because there's one other thing that kind of ties the two together that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Which was so as we've established, I was obsessed with the cartoon. Like I could quote lines from the cartoon all day.
I still have some of the merch. I still have a poster.
Yeah, that I'm so insane.
Yeah, my brother still has the talking doll, the giant.
Yeah.
It's more than a foot tall of the Tick, and you click the back, and he's got his catchphrases.
I have I still have the original SNES beat 'em up video game, that I play on my Super Nintendo.
I didn't know that they made that. That's so cool.
It's like it's not as good as Maximum Carnage, the Spider-Man game, because that's kind of like to me, that was the pinnacle of like superhero beat 'em up games. It's fun. It's the Tick, it's that kind of stuff. But anyway, I'm obsessed with the cartoon. I love it. So I went back and reread the original comics mostly as an adult, and one thing that struck me, first of all, these comics hold up really well.
Really well. Through every stage of my life. They were great when I was a kid. They were great as a teenager. They were great in my 20s. They're great now. Yeah.
And as an adult, like by the time I read the comic, I had already been reading, for example, Frank Miller and other stuff.
All the staples.
I got all of the parodies and references. Like I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, that's Elektra. Dick Tracy. I get this. And so I get the parodies. But what struck me the most, I think, about reading this was how many jokes that were in the cartoon that were just straight taken out of the comic.
Oh yeah.
And I don't say that as a criticism. I think that's really great because
the jokes held up.
Because the jokes hold up. They're really good. They're really funny. And it's a testament to how funny they really are. But it's also a testament to how much work Ben Edlund himself was putting into the cartoon, which I know for a fact he was like really he oversaw everything on the cartoon. It was like it was his baby.
Like him like Jonan Vasquez, he got hip deep in that sucker. Yes, and like he kept his pencil out. Like Jonan Vasquez for the first season of Invader Zim did all of the character designs.
Right.
And all of the storyboard directing. Mm-hmm. And he was the head writer in the writer's room. He was the only writer for some of it.
Yeah.
And Edlund had more of a team, but not much.
Right. I mean, he had our boy Christopher McCulloch, aka Jackson Public.
Yeah, but he didn't have him right away. That's a fun story. We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah. So I guess I was just so struck by how many like verbatim jokes, and even the stories, like there's like minor twists here and there, but like the Chairface Chippendale story
that they kept that episode.
It was like they just switched out the Dick Tracy parody character for the American-made Captain America parody character in the cartoon. But I mean, otherwise it was like mostly the same,
And if you've never read this comic and you don't know what we're talking about, there is an episode of The Tick and an issue of the comic where the Tick is at a convenience store buying Pez to include with dinner, where he runs into a secret agent who's not been in touch with his organization since the 50s.
Yeah.
To follow up on secret agent stuff. And what they find is a international criminal rogues gallery in the penthouse suite. And they are headed up by the Moriarty of this criminal group, the top criminal of all criminals, and his name is Chairface Chippendale. And Chairface Chippendale, I'm looking for a picture because I don't want to ruin it. That's too much.
Well, I can throw one up.
Okay, Chairface Chippendale has a chair for a head.
That's his his supervillain scar, because all the villains are like Dick Tracy villains. So you have like Zipper Neck and the crease,
where his face is creased, or pineapple popo, where his face looks like a pineapple, or the eyebrows. So Chairface has a chair for a face, and his evil plan is to use these lenses to make a super laser to carve his name into the moon. Mm-hmm. That's the premise. Yeah. And he halfway succeeds. He puts CHA into the moon, and that persists for the rest of the comic and for the rest of the series. Yeah, and that's one of the most memorable. I think that's one of the most memorable things about the cartoon, because that's like the second episode. He puts the CHA on the moon, and then for the whole rest of the series, anytime there's a shot of the moon, you see the CHA. You see CHA, and that's a big deal because, like, in this time in cartoons and sitcoms, everything reboots. The
Exactly,
next episode, it's like the last one never happened. Nothing builds on itself. This was the first cartoon to build their jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a lot of that. Sorry, I was going to gush about the cartoon.
But yeah, I know it's really hard not to gush about the cartoon because it's so good. But it's also, it is, again, like gushing about the cartoon, it's sort of tied to gushing about the book. Yeah, because it's so uniquely entwined with it. Like Ben Edlund, he made this book, and then he went and made the cartoon, and he basically took all of the best aspects of this book. Like this book was like a solid template for the cartoon, and then they just little tweaks here and there, but for the most part, a lot of it is really lifted wholesale out of the book, which and then I'm just really impressed by that he was able to really keep it his own.
And after season 1, they started putting more and more like letting the show do its own thing. So let's back up. Let's go ahead and talk about their transition. Ben Edlund, young guy in his 20s, has a hit indie comic series, and he goes to the West Coast to pitch it, or he's called by studios to go and pitch. And that's what he's always wanted. He was in film school. He wanted to work in movies and TV and animation. So he runs over there, just runs screaming, yes, the promised land. The pitch gets greenlit by Fox for their Fox Kids Saturday mornings. And off he goes. And so they have to tweak it the way you tweak everything. It starts with just the Tick, and then it's the Tick and Arthur in the comic. And then you meet other superhero groups like the Civic Minded Four.
Civic Minded Five.
It says Civic Minded Five, excuse me. Wasn't it just, and anyway, so in the cartoon series, they made a gallery of heroes, some that were reworked, and some that were brand new. And some of the brand new were American made, who's Captain America, except it's a woman, and she's a maid. And it sounds ridiculous, but she rules. She was a fun character.
It's the best pun, American made. It's a pun on made.
It's the best pun.
It's like jingoist patriotism, buy American, but also she's literally a maid.
And like all of her superhero gadgets are like her high heel. Her high heel shoes are like throwing stars. They're spiked. You've got my favorite character, the sewer urchin. They made an entire episode just to say, hey, sewer urchin is fun and funny. And it's very clear that the writers had been saving it forever because he was the butt of every joke. And then they have an entire episode that takes place in the sewer. Is like, wow, sewer urchin down here, you're cool. Oh yeah, definitely. Down here, I'm considered the apotheosis of cool. Which, fun fact, that's where I learned that word. Is that episode? I pulled out a dictionary.
Same here.
You've got the deflator mouse, which is their Batman stand-in, except every time there's trouble, he disappears. You have the Civic Minded Four. You've got like Dinosaur Jones. So Ben Edlund finishes this, gets called by Hollywood, for lack of better words, and then this is it. He's done with comics. Despite how good he was, this was not his first love nor his end goal, which, as a comics till I die kind of guy, I'm like, really, dude? You never picked up a pencil again? If this will never happen, but if Hollywood should ever call me in any aspect or any of my pitches go anywhere, I'm gonna go ahead and pick up my pencil 1 or 2 more times before I die. And homeboy did not. This is it. And this, I mean, it's not insubstantial. It's a classic. It is, I dare say, this thing will be timeless. But it also represents just a whole lot of talent that is, pardon me, going to waste because he never made a comic after this. This is almost tragic.
It is. It's like I said, it's interesting to watch him like. I don't want to say like watch his career because I don't really watch his career, but I do watch the development of the Tick as a character because I really do love the character, and I want to see more of the Tick. And I think kind of like what you're saying is it almost seems like if Ben Edlund wanted to bring more Tick into the world, it seems like it would be easier to make a Tick comic book than to try and keep pitching a TV series. Which
see, I don't think that's the case though. Like for instance, the Tick is ongoing. They still come out with comics.
No, they do.
when I was a teenager, my very first shot at the comics industry was they were taking submissions to be the new Tick artist.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they went with somebody who was infinitely better than I was because I was in no shape to make comics when I was a teenager. Like there's not a whole lot more Tick to make. The best they can do is just kind of retread the ground in a new way somehow. Like I don't think Edlund really wants to make more Tick. I think that people just keep asking him and he won't say no to a job.
Well, it is a viable property too. Like if you're just talking about like
the character just won't die.
Literally he's a Tick. They don't die.
Like he had the cartoon series Fox Kids for inexplicable reasons had such like Fox does this. He worked on 2 shows that have huge cult followings of rabid fans, and both of which Fox just said, never mind.
Yeah.
He worked on Firefly. Whedon picked him up for Firefly. So Comedy Central bought the Tick and started running reruns. They did the same thing they did to Futurama.
Yep.
They bought the show, they would air the reruns, and while they're airing the reruns, they're behind the scenes trying to make more stuff happen.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, people kept saying, no, we're not going to make more Tick. And then inexplicably, Fox decided to make a live action version. And if I'm Ben Edlund, like he at the time was working in TV. Like he directed some TV shows. He was doing writing. Like he's just a working guy in Hollywood TV, which was, to my knowledge, his goal in the first place.
Yeah.
And he kept getting approached. You want to do more Tick? Do you want to do more Tick? You want to do more Tick? We've got some Tick juice over here. And so they're like, let's make a live action series. And if I'm the guy who made the Tick, I'm like, be a showrunner for a beloved character? Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And especially if they're like, Patrick Warburton will be your star. Be like, oh, double yes. Yeah, Patrick Warburton. He's a great Tick. He's probably the only guy who could pull off the Tick as a live action character, just despite not sounding like the original voice actor.
Yeah.
Which the original voice actor just nailed it. Like I read the comic, that was the voice in my head. When I saw the show, I was like, yep, that's it.
I have to agree, yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you who didn't watch the show, the Tick sounds like this. He's a hero. He is hero among heroes. Arthur, my body is a giant weapon. Leap, man, leap. And he has these great soliloquies, these great little, the city.
The monologues.
The city. The city is like a place of turgid crime and all sorts of bad things. I can't quote it, but
it's hard to riff on that because there's like that's actually one thing that's worth talking about. Because Ben Edlund writes those long monologues of just Tick waxing philosophical, and it's a perfect parody of the type of superhero internal narration that's like it says a lot, but it also says absolutely nothing. Like it's kind of a parody on the nature of superhero comics, which is I have always maintained that superhero comics are morality stories for children. And so
I would disagree with the for children part, but yes, you're correct.
You can there's some that's a different discussion.
Back in 1939, Captain America first comes out. Like the audience was always who were in the neighborhood of 18 to 20.
Yeah, during World War II, GIs were reading comic books. Like they were sent to them as part of their care packages. Like just reading.
And also because Jack Kirby made Captain America, it actually got him in a little bit of trouble in his unit.
Yeah. Oh, there's a great story about that, which we won't go into here. But
no, we won't.
But so what I'm saying is
one of the parody jokes that they would do in the Tick is the Tick would make time to brood.
Yes,
like, pardon me, Arthur, I need to go to the rooftop to brood.
It's this whole on the surface absurd parody of things that are just like standard superhero stuff. So waxing philosophical about good and evil, learning a lesson, brooding. It's like searching for crime, it's like on patrol,
manufacturing a battle cry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, coming up with a battle cry. Exactly. Yeah, that just needing a sidekick.
Oh, yeah, because, of course, superheroes have sidekicks.
Yeah, superheroes have sidekicks.
And more to Edlund's credit, writing those monologues is hard. Like, it's deceptive.
It is. That's
because it's got to thread a very strange needle. It's
right.
a superhero who knows he's a superhero who is also a literal mental patient.
Right.
Like, it's a guy pretending to be a superhero, except he's not pretending, except he's delusional, except he's not delusional.
Right.
And it's also just the comedy of the thing. You've got to write it so that it's coherent.
Well, because
like the sci-fi trope, you list the two things that people would recognize, and then the one alien thing.
Yeah.
It's like Earth jazz, or like opera, or like Klingon war chants.
Yeah.
So, like, I've got one of them, if I may. This is the city is quiet, peaceful, boring as hell. No distant wail of police sirens, no bright flashes of gunfire. I dance these rooftops praying for a sociopath with world domination on his mind. But this place is running low on peril. Hey, I'm getting better at this.
Yeah. It's just a great, like, I think they get developed more in the cartoon, but also later in the book, when, like, the way they wrap up each episode with him offering the big speech that, like, starts to build up onto something, and it, like, it's such a perfect metaphor, and then it will completely fall apart and mean nothing by the end of it. It's so great.
It's so great. In this comic, he makes a speech. Like in the TV series, he made a speech at the end of most episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was exactly what you described. Like, here's the moral of the story, except no, it's just an incoherent babbling that falls off the rails, becomes funny, and then becomes kind of sad.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Usually somebody says, all right, Tick, thanks. Like, just before it gets sad.
Yeah.
And like here, he's about to leave the city. And he's found out by all of the mental patients that left from the giant hole that he went through.
Yeah.
And they're like, Tick, you're leaving, but we're your worshipers. And like, give us a speech. Give us some words of wisdom. Please, a speech. It says, always remember, less is less. More is more. More is better. And twice as much is good, too. Not enough is bad. And too much is never enough. Except when it's just right.
It's perfect. Like, it means nothing. It's so much, but means nothing.
If I had to give a commencement speech, that's the one.
That's the one. Save that in your back pocket.
Like it weirded me out, because as I'm reading it, I'm like, this is literally every commencement speech I've ever heard.
Exactly. Yeah.
Couldn't like, I would be happy if they made another Tick animated series. Like, it doesn't have to look the same.
I actually think that would probably be my preferred outcome. Like,
I could not believe that they did, because the second time around it was a high budget live action thing, which is what it would have to be, because in the comic, in the comic they have the Night of a Million Zillion Ninjas, which is awesome, which introduced the joke that I'll never get tired of, is the ninjas would, like, all the faceless stormtroopers would be like, give us back the MacGuffin.
Yeah.
And that's it, or we'll get you. But they would also have, like, oh, Terry, quick, like, shoot another arrow, like another warning shot, freak her out.
Yeah.
Or they have this great moment where the ninjas are standing around and one of them is holding up the ninja handbook of all the stuff ninjas can do. Says, neat.
Yeah. Ninjas can read minds.
Yeah, it's like, we can? Cool. And there was that one moment where they did an actual ninja thing. They're trying to get the leading lady, the stand-in for Elektra, whom is named Oedipus for reasons I do not understand. Like, I that's the thorn in my side of the whole comic. Why is her name Oedipus?
Yeah.
There's nothing Oedipal about this character. Also, when I was 9, I read it like Oedipedius or something. So anyway, just like, they're trying to get her, she has something they want, and a ninja stabs her in the shoulder, and she just leans against the car, says, damn it, Terry. and
I did love that.
Yeah, the ninja next to Terry says, dude, you just stabbed her. Oh, I guess I did. I mean, we've got these swords. And then you see him again, they're like, got an arm on her shoulder, be like, hey, Oedipus, you all right? You good?
Yeah. Well, what I did like about that issue and this is what made it not just like this is what made it more of a parody of Frank Miller and not just or like a satirization of Frank Miller and not just kind of like an homage to Frank Miller's style, is that really the story was kind of about the Americanization and the like whitewashing of the concept of the ninja.
Oh yeah, like that was a huge
because that was a huge thing. And, well,
like
and that was,
a legit ninja from Japan comes over and he's like, "What is this crap? Why is everybody so chubby and ineffective?"
Yeah, because they're all. It's like the American, like. Because what did he say? Like it was like the American chapter of Ninja, whatever, and they was run by a respectable ninja. And then it got took over by somebody who had better business sense.
Yeah, it was took over by a capitalist.
Yeah,
and he's like, ninja are supposed to be tough and stealthy and dangerous, and the American guy's like, you don't make money that way.
No, yeah, it's all about branding.
Yeah, and he's like, they it's the perfect them talking past each other, like the guy who's trying to make a thing versus the guy who's trying to make money.
Right.
And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, what do you mean, what am I doing? Do you not see how much money we're making?
Yeah.
I'm doing the thing.
But it's also like, it's again, the time period that this was made in the 80s, like that was the great ninja boom, when ninjas were suddenly like a thing and everybody was like, oh, you got to put ninjas, like they're the go-to villain,
That's why we had Ninja Turtles. That's why.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's why we had that freaking movie, Little Ninjas.
Three Ninjas.
The Three Ninjas.
Surf Ninjas. But I mean,
did you see the Three Ninjas when you were a kid?
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were a kid, wasn't it kind of awesome?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And they each had their own individual masks, and you tried to think which what would my ninja name be. Crap.
I'm not gonna say that I wasn't into ninjas, at the time.
Because ninjas are awesome. It was cool.
I read G.I. Joe. The two coolest characters was Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. Ninjas.
Yeah, exactly.
Daredevil, like Frank Miller brought ninjas into Daredevil, turned everything into ninjas.
Saturday Night Live, all the kung fu movies had ninjas.
Yeah, kung fu movies.
Saturday Night Live did their ninja parody. Like that was the other joke that I just loved. It's like all of the ninjas who just got beat up by the guy are hanging out and saying, "Okay, how do we do better?" That's
one of the best Saturday Night Live skits ever. John Goodman as the head of the ninjas. And
somebody elbows Chris Farley. He's like, "Yeah, we could work more on our physical fitness."
Yeah,
or
it's
he's
a locker room after the play. And
I think we should invest more in these throwing stars. Yeah. Adam Sandler pulls his hood back. He's like, there's a star right here. It's like, I think we need to work more on our aim first.
Yeah.
Do we need like a doctor or something? No, I'm trying not to think about it.
No, that was a brilliant sketch.
Again, so So it's the ninja boom of the time period.
Yeah, but it's a perfect joke on just like bland American ninjas. Like they're not tied to the original, like, noble mysticism or whatever.
Which, just fun fact, actual ninjas, there's nothing noble about it. It's espionage. It's a state job. It's just you're the spy for your daimyo. That's all it is.
And that was even the funny thing. He did a good job of making that joke too when he's got Oedipus, like, the standoff, and he's like gonna break her neck if the character Paul the Samurai, which we haven't even talked about, but they're having a standoff. And he's like, well, I could probably cut you down before you break her neck. And then the ninja just pulls out a gun, and he's like, but ninjas also adapt, which is also true. Really, ninjas, it wasn't
historically, ninjas picked up firearms faster than the army.
Exactly, because it was all about just whatever weapon gets the job done, because you're not a noble samurai caste race.
You're somebody's espionage. Yeah. Your whole job is to do spy shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And spy shit includes just killing people and running away, and a gun is a quick way to do it.
And not getting caught. The whole point is not getting caught.
And the reason that the mysticism appeared was because, there's some martial art involved in getting into a room full of sleeping samurai silently. There's little tricks and techniques, and you did have to have incredible balance, and you did have to be kind of an acrobat, and you did have to be kind of a contortionist, because that's what the job was.
Right.
But what people forgot was this was a job. This is like the one aspect of Japanese society that was not completely governed by tradition.
Right.
Not complete. Like there's some there, but it's the one part that wasn't all tradition.
Right. Well, it was the most adaptable.
Yeah. And one of my favorite jokes, there's a character named Paul the Samurai.
Yeah.
He's a samurai. He's funny. He's trying to take down the ninjas. And he has this moment where he taps one of their phone lines and he's like, so Sagan has gone to fight Shin. And he pulls out his sword and has his samurai soliloquy. And he's like, once a samurai draws his sword, he cannot sheath it until it has tasted blood. And there's no one around. So the next panel, he just holds up his hand that's got band-aids all over it. Like
covered in cut. Like,
and the next panel, cuts. He's in his car putting another band-aid on.
Yeah, he's like all these like tiny little band-aids over all those little cuts from where he has to cut himself before he can sheath his sword. Brilliant.
There's one more bit of brilliance in terms of the comedy, in terms of the writing. Like the thing that comedians do is, like I was watching a conversation between Seinfeld and Eddie Murphy. Mm-hmm. It's like comedians are real. You spot the thing that's absurd. Like Eddie Murphy's one of his most famous routines was talking about the ice cream truck. It's like, it's ridiculous. It is a truck that's just playing music with a stranger who hands out treats and kids just run to it and everybody freaks out. You can get the same stuff at the grocery store down the street anytime you want for cheaper. But ice cream truck, right?
Yeah.
So like the Ben Edlund joke is, if you had just an army of henchmen, these would be dopes.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Why are they henchmen? Because nothing else is working out.
Exactly.
Like that's a line in the Venture Brothers when henchmen are just hanging out. It's like it's either this. All I got's a GED. It's either this or the army. Yeah, it's a bunch of nerds who've got nothing else going on and are otherwise unemployable.
Yeah,
and so all of the American ninjas are idiots who have like swords and throwing stars but don't know how to use any of them. Even Oedipus is like, it was 3 hard weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks of training. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Gabe, we've been going for almost another hour and a half now.
Really?
On the tick.
Yeah. Damn it.
So let's begin the wrapping up procedure, and we'll probably end this podcast like in another 30, 45 minutes.
I am such a chatty guy. I'm not proud of this.
It makes for good entertainment, I think.
You think so? Maybe you think so because we're friends.
You should start your own like solo podcast and just.
I do. I have one, and I just ramble.
You're not ranting enough. I think that's probably the problem.
For those of you listening, I do have a video series called Art and Coffee where it's on YouTube. Just look up Art and Coffee, and I talk about art and comics and storytelling. And it's from the bent of like, if you're making the stuff and you have questions, I've got answers from my own personal experience, which is limited, but it's not nothing. And so I try really hard to keep episodes like 25 minutes and less. But the last couple have been like 33, 35. And I had to split up into 2-parters. But there you go. And the idea is just when I'm drawing, I could really use an artist to keep me company and talk art stuff with me. So if you're making art, you're having a long night of the soul, and you need an art buddy to just yammer at you about art stuff, I yammer quite effectively.
Yes, as evidenced here in this podcast.
Yeah, so Art and Coffee, give it me. If you did not find me completely off-putting and just my chatty Cathiness not just terrifying and annoying, and if I did not put you in rages, then by all means give my little video series a chance. This is how you push something, right? This is how
yes, that's how it's done. That's seamless.
This is how you promote things. Hey, if you don't hate me, try some more of me.
So, any final thoughts on The Tick by Ben Edlund? I think we both agree. We wish he would do some more, but I'd be happy with more in any capacity. I understand why he wants to do more TV stuff if he wants to, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon. His
strategy of doing what he's been doing, just working in Hollywood, just being one of the working guys, writing and directing. Like I found somewhere on the internet, his net worth is estimated at $22 million.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
No, he worked on Supernatural for multiple years. He worked on a bunch of stuff. Like he wrote a lot of things with Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon picked him up early in his career.
Okay.
So like A, they're union jobs, and B, they're negotiated aggressively. So like,
Mhm.
yeah, like if you're smart with your money, you know, working as a regular on any TV series
Yeah,
for
yeah.
long enough, you could squirrel away enough money for a good long while.
Oh.
Like I'm pretty sure that all of the regulars from Deep Space Nine were able to live off of Deep Space Nine for the rest of their
Mhm.
lives because they squirreled it away. And so that's what Edlund did. And I think, I don't know, man. I just get the feeling that's what he wanted, and that's why he's there.
Oh, I
Uh,
think so. I think so too. Yeah.
so yeah, groundbreaking, and it's the only thing that exists, and it didn't get good again. Like the two most important bits of the Tick were this, and then Big Blue Destiny by a different creator, Eli Stone, who, fun fact, made the Tick Big Blue Destiny. The comic got popular again because it was so good, and
Mhm.
then Eli dropped off the face of the earth for a while,
Mm.
and to this day, that's his only comic. Like,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Now,
I was
God
wondering
bless him.
because I'd never heard of him. I don't know anything by him. That would be why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like my very first convention was at Boston, and the New England comics guys were there, and I said, "Hey, what happened to Eli?" And they're like, "Dude, we don't even know. I haven't heard from him in years. I
Wow.
last I heard, it's like he's got a series of mental problems
Mm.
that either went unchecked or his medication wasn't right, and just homeboy dropped off the face of the world, and that's it. Now,
Yeah.
I am happy to report that Eli Stone and I follow each other on Instagram now.
Oh.
Yeah, that's just one
Wow.
day. One day it just appeared that Eli Stone is following you. I'm like, this guy still lives. He's
Wow.
and so I've inferred that, like, no, he's married. He's got kids. He's doing. It looks like, you know, social media can be
Yeah.
deceiving, but it
Yeah.
looks like he's doing real well, and good for him.
Well, good.
But much like Edlund, he made his portion of the Tick that was incredible and groundbreaking yet again. And that's it. Like, I haven't
Mhm.
seen him make anything else since then. I am saving that. Like, I am hoping that he and I, much like you and I did, get to know each other through the internet a little bit longer, and then we can have a conversation, be like, all right, dude, what happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why aren't you drawing anymore? I miss you. Oh, and if Eli Stone is watching this, hi, I'm Gabe. I'm a fan.
Big fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that book in the future. We'll do. We might have to do one on Karma Tornado too, just to
I mean, if you insist,
complete
I
the
won't say
set.
no.
So, but in the meantime, I think we're gonna wrap up here about Edlund's Tick. I think it's essential reading for superhero comedy.
Essential reading for American comics.
Yeah, for comics. I think it's I don't want to like go off too much because we've already spent a lot of time talking, but I do think that this is something that is a problem in a lot of American comics. Like there's like I think it's really hard for a lot of American comics to be funny, comic books.
Yes.
Because there's a difference between a comic strip, like a jokey strip, like there's because it's like it's a weird thing to say because so many comics are funny. Like people think of comics, they think of the Sunday funnies, and it's like, yeah, okay, you have your funny comic strips, but I always maintain that it's so difficult for a comic book to be funny. It seems like a lot of times when writers try to do that, it just falls really flat.
Yeah, and it's part of it is because you have to write and draw the thing to make it really sing.
Yes.
And like Edlund would do that, like something that people discovered a long time ago. The way to compose the image for comedy is to do flat, like get straight eye level with the characters, flat composition, and they'll do that for the comedy portions. And not every comic will do that. And comic artists, if you're just drawing it based on a script, if you flatten stuff out, you feel like a moron.
Yeah.
Because you got it drilled in your head. You're not supposed to do that. It's not visually interesting.
Right.
And building on that, like the time period that this came out, 89 is when things got dark and gritty and all the, like, that's when, like, the reason Bruce Banner is so enraged is because of his repressed childhood memories of his childhood abuse. And like the Green Lantern was a drug addict or something.
Yeah.
Like, I have one of the original 90s Spider-Man anti-drug things, and it was just ridiculous and awful and just, oh, man. So, like, that's when, like, comics were dark and gritty, and this is for grown-ups now.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, no, by being dark and gritty, it just made it more adolescent.
Yep.
And that is the backdrop from where the Tick appeared. This thing that is, for my money, one of the more adult comics made, because it's so deep and dense and so full of jokes, but because it's so funny and because it's so well made. It's like, I read it when I was 9, I read it when I was 13, when I was 16, when I was 20, I read it again recently. It's still perfect. It's still one of the best comics I've ever read. And like, whenever I meet somebody, they're like, I'm trying to get into comics. What should I be reading? This is on my list. It's like, well, look, if you have to read things like, you have to read The Watchmen. I'm sorry, you have to.
Yeah.
You got to read Kingdom Come. I'm sorry, you have to. You've got to read Bone. You've got to read The Tick.
I have to agree.
You have to read Purgatory Pub.
Yeah, and Purgatory Pub. That's right. Well, I think that will actually wrap it up this episode.
Yes,
thank you, Gabe, for coming on here and talking Tick with me. I know,
of course.
I know.
Thank you for giving me an excuse.
Yeah, I know I don't have to twist your arm to get you to talk about the Tick, but
you don't have to twist my arm to get me to talk, man.
That's true. But thank you.
Just talk.
Thank you anyway, and thanks everybody for listening. You can find MP3s of this podcast at comicdna.podbean.com. And, of course, the video is up on my YouTube channel, Comic DNA on YouTube. And I let Gabe pitch his comics at the top of the hour, hour and a half. We'll see. And you can read my comics. I currently have a comic it's at reclasscomic.com. We've hosted on Tapastic. It's called The Uncontrollable Reclass. It's an all-ages superhero group comic. And I take a lot of stuff from the Tick. Not consciously, but like just my superheroes are just kind of in that vein of the Tick, like absurd takes on superheroes. And
it's somebody from the outside. Like, the reason that Aaron and I know each other is because years and years ago he hired me to do some art for some of his comics, and the script is so funny. He's got some, like, he does some really good stuff. I won't say that it's too ticky, but like speaking of people who know comedy, this guy right here, Mr. Aaron Walther, he knows what he's doing. Please do yourself a favor and find his comics.
Well, you flatter me, sir. And if you guys...
I do not. It is the truth.
If you're looking for other comics of mine, you can go to my website, aaronwalther.com. And we're not running a Kickstarter right now because my artist friend, Edwin B. Bickford III, he and I are both really busy and we don't have time or the what would you like, the mental fortitude to run a Kickstarter the way Gabe does. But our recently finished book, American Chop Suey, is currently up on my website for pre-order. So we're gonna do a small print run, and you can pre-order it right now. It's $25, 140-page graphic novel. And for the pre-orders, we're giving away an exclusive print by the amazing, awesome artist Buster Moody, who did a pinup of the characters for us. So, excuse me. So, we got the pre-order set up, and then once the book's printed, the book will be for sale, and you can buy it, while supplies last. But so that's my comics, reclasscomic.com and aaronwalther.com. Find all my stuff there.
Spell aaronwalther.com.
AARONWALTHER.
And American Chop Suey is good stuff. I'm definitely going to pre-order that sucker right now.
Oh, well, thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, I didn't know you were pre-ordering. I feel like quite a putz that I know about this.
I haven't made the announcement yet. You're the first person to hear about it. So by the time this podcast goes up, the pre-order will be ready. So
I am not letting this go to my head at all. Definitely not.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.